Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. How's everybody doing today? ISCJ community. Hope everyone is well, inshallah. Hope everyone's doing all that they can do during this time while they're home. Using this time, it's a very special time. It's somewhat like Ramadan, where we're kind of somewhat thrown off of our normal schedules, and we are forced in a good way to come up with new habits, good habits, perhaps dump old habits. So this is a great primer, I think. You always have to, as a Muslim, as a believer, look at the good side of any sort of calamity or trial or tribulation. And I think this is a time unlike any other where we have a chance to work on ourselves, work on our knowledge of deen. We have so much time. One of our friends was saying that he's actually gathered his whole family, and I'd like to emulate him in doing this as well. The whole family is actually reading one juz per day together. So they have a finished pile on one side, and then they have the unfinished pile on the other side. And I think they're already like halfway through, mashallah. And it's an amazing time to do things with the family. The Muslim is always optimistic. Our modus operandi is to make lemonade out of lemons. And so I see so many people that are really using this time to work on themselves, work on their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the month, of Sha'ban, where we're right before Ramadan. And these are opportunities for us to fast, especially now in the middle of the month, the 3 white days, and then you have Thursday coming up as well. So good time to practice our deen. So khair, inshallah, let's get started. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Today we're going to be talking about Sayyidina Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anhu, the great muadhin of Nabi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was the muadhin, the caller of the adhan of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Bilal ibn Rabah, just so we have some background about him, his father was Rabah, who was an Arab man. His mother was actually a princess in Abyssinia, and they were not slaves. They were not born into slavery. They were prominent people in their society, and they were taken from there, and they were brought into slavery when they came over to Mecca. And it's described that Bilal ibn Rabah, he was a very strong, muscular person, very beautiful, very good looking, dark skinned, and because of his attributes, his abilities, his capabilities, he was sold to the noble families, the families that had lineage within the Quraysh of aristocracy, aristocrats. So he would be sold to them and basically serve them as a slave. And so this was a person that had no free will to a great degree. Everything was commanded of him, and his master, the person that had bought him, was Umayyah bin Khalaf, who was a staunch enemy of Islam, and a very cruel type of a person. We know about the stories, and I'll talk about it a little bit, about his the way that he would torment Bilal ibn Rabah, that they would actually take him into a room, deprive him of food and water. They would curse him. They would say derogatory, racist comments like "Ya Ibn Sauda," "Oh, son of a black woman," and they would forcefully say this to him to ingrain in him that in some way that he was inferior to them. And they would take out idols of Allat and Al-Uzza and make Sayyidina Bilal kiss them, and make put it up by his lips, and then they would make him say that that you worship Allat and that you worship Al-Uzza and accept them, and they would spit on him and whip him and all of these things. And then when they tormented Bilal, the only words that he knew at the time, Sayyidina Umar would ask him later on, why is it that when Umayyah used to torture you, all you could say was Ahadun Ahad, one, Allah is one. And Bilal ibn Rabah, he responded that that was all I knew. That was all I knew how to say. If I knew more, I would have said more. But all I knew was that Allah is one. So Bilal had accepted Islam when he used to hear his master Umayyah um, talk about him. His owner would talk about the Prophet ﷺ, and the oneness of God, and he didn't understand too much. But it is from the fitrah that Bilal understood this, that there was a calling to one God and the worship of one God, and immediately Islam entered his heart, hearing about it just from his owner, who was an enemy of Islam. And so the torture that they brought upon him because of his acceptance of Islam, a lot of it was done publicly. They used to whip him so that the other slaves would get the message that if this is the path that you want to choose for yourself, then this is going to be your outcome as well. And so came to the point where they were taking him out into the hot desert sun. And imagine, how hot it gets here in New Jersey. When we have a heat wave, it's in the 90s. It's almost unbearable sometimes. But then we ultimately come back into our air-conditioned homes and everything is fine. Imagine in the Arabian Peninsula in Hijaz, where it's scorching hot, and they're taking him out there and they're whipping him and they're putting stones on him and they're making him try to denounce the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And all Bilal ibn Rabah would say is ahadun ahad, ahadun ahad. And then finally they were getting other slaves to carry a massive rock to essentially break his back. And the Prophet ﷺ, he goes to everybody and says, will somebody go and free this man? And Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, of course, our hero from the first parts of this series, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, one of his many virtues, this was one of them. He goes and he approaches Umayyah bin Khalaf, and he comes to him with 10 dinars. And Umayyah bin Khalaf, he takes it and he says that this is for the freedom of Bilal. I want you to free him, take 10 dinars. And Umayyah ibn Khalaf starts to laugh. And he says, oh, Abu Bakr, if you had haggled with me and if you had negotiated with me, I would have given this man to you for just 1 dinar. Right? He's trying to debase Bilal ibn Rabah and try to make him seem like he's worth nothing. Right? And Abu Bakr Siddiq, he notices this. And he wants to uplift his brother in Islam, who is Bilal. And he says, by Allah, Umayyah, if you had haggled with me and you had asked for 100 dinars instead of this 10 dinar, I would have brought that money to you and I would free Bilal. And so he wanted to uplift and bring up the morale and boost his morale for Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anhu, and he frees him. He purchases him and then he frees him. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr would call Bilal ibn Rabah, Sayyidina Bilal, he would call him Sayyiduna, our master Bilal, right? And Umar ibn al-Khattab, he would say, Abu Bakr Sayyiduna wa ataka Sayyiduna, that Abu Bakr is our master and he freed our master. And this is the level and the maqam that they took Bilal ibn Rabah, that a man that was destined for slavery, who was born into this slavery, he was living his life as a slave, he was serving as a slave, and he would go on to perhaps die as a slave, and he was raised in ranks when he entered the brotherhood of Islam. There was a dream that was seen by Abdullah ibn Zayd. Abdullah ibn Zayd, he saw a dream. He goes to the Prophet ﷺ. He says that an angel came to me and he taught me these words. And the Prophet ﷺ recognizes that this is the adhan, this is the call to the prayer. This is when they're in Medina, when this episode happens. And instead of saying that, oh, you're Arab, why don't you go and make the adhan? He says, no, go find Bilal and go teach him these words. And so Abdullah goes to Bilal, Sayyidina Bilal, anhu, and he teaches him the adhan. And after that, he's commanded to go to make adhan at Masjid al-Nabawi in Medina. And so Bilal anhu, he gets up for the first time in Medina and says, Allahu Akbar, and makes the whole adhan. Every time he is making the utterances of the adhan, the business people, they're stopping their transactions. The people that are on the streets, everything is stopping. the mother who's taking care of her child and cooking, she stopped. Everything, life comes to a stop, and everybody comes to Masjid al-Nabawi to pray all together as a community. And this was the beginning of the adhan, and we will see how this had some more significance later on down the road. In the Fath of Mecca, the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ, as you know, they enter Mecca after 10 years of being exiled in Medina and having a stronghold in Medina, and Islam sprung out and it became very strong in Medina from the Aus and the Khazraj, the two tribes that were converting and they were coming into Islam. They come back to Mecca and there is no bloodshed on this day. And as a matter of fact, Sa'd said to the Prophet ﷺ that this is the day of bloodshed. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Sa'd, no, change that. This is the day of mercy. This is the day of mercy. And he tells to the people, you know, as they're looking around and they see where Sumayya radiallahu anha, how she was martyred, the first woman martyr in Islam, the first martyr in Islam, radiallahu anha. They see where, you know, they were boycotted and ostracized. They see where, all of this torment that used to take place in Mecca. 10 years later, they return and they see all of this, and all of these emotions are there. And at this point, the Prophet ﷺ, he says that he forgives them the same way that Yusuf alayhi salam forgave his brothers. These are his relatives. These are his extended relatives and family. The Prophet ﷺ forgives everybody. And at this time, they go to the Kaaba during the conquest of Mecca, during Fath Mecca, and you have the top of the top Sahaba there. You have the 10 promised Jannah, the Ashara Mubashirun, they are there. You have Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Umar, you have all of them there, and Uthman, Ali, they're all there. And the Prophet ﷺ, he calls Bilal. He summons Bilal and he says, go to the Kaaba. And, oh Bilal, I want you to make the adhan. And now coming from Medina and having made adhan in Medina, in the city of the Prophet ﷺ, and now coming over to Mecca where it all started. And now Bilal starts to make the adhan at the Kaaba. At this time, Harith bin Hisham is there, Utbah is there, Abu Sufyan is there. These three had not converted. As we know, Abu Sufyan would go on to become one of the great Sahabis. At this time, they had not reverted back to Islam. They were the enemies of Islam. And they start to talk and they see Bilal. And they say, thank God my father is not alive to see this day that a black man is making adhan at the Kaaba. And when this happens, the Prophet ﷺ is not there. But he goes to them. He's informed of this through, through ilham and through a revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He goes to them and he tells them about the conversation that they've had. And he denounces this. And he lets them know that no Arab is better than a non-Arab. And no non-Arab is better than an Arab. And kullukum min Adam wa Adam min Turab. That you are all from Adam, and Adam is from clay. And this was a statement that the Prophet ﷺ was showing them, that a token of society that he wanted to build because of the fairness and the justice of Islam. That a man that came from slavery and he would rise to give the adhan not only in the city of the Prophet ﷺ, but also in Mecca, where he was brought in as a slave. And today he is here and freeing Mecca and calling out, at the top of his lungs, the call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the call to oneness, the call to one God. And so he's showing them that this is the society, and this was not some sort of a publicity stunt, right? Sayyidina Bilal was the most qualified to be the mu'adhin of Nabi Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so, and there were so many other, black or dark-skinned Sahabi. So why Bilal? And so this was not some sort of, we often say in talks about racism and in talks about the virtues of Bilal radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ was, putting Bilal forward to show that how fair Islam is. But Bilal was also the most qualified to do this. The Prophet ﷺ, when he was passing away, and what a sorrow-stricken and extremely depressing time that it must have been for the companions. And Sayyidina Bilal would constantly be going to the chambers, to the room of the Prophet ﷺ, and he would say, Ya Rasulullah, it's time for Salah. Ya Rasulullah, it's time for Salah. And he would see, the Prophet ﷺ struggling in the pangs of death, the pains of death that were stricken the Prophet ﷺ. And he would be extremely heartbroken seeing the Prophet ﷺ this way. And he was so close. Bilal was so close to the Prophet ﷺ that in many moments of solitude, when all of the other companions were told to go away, oftentimes he would keep Bilal next to him because he just enjoyed that company of Sayyidina Bilal. And so when the Prophet ﷺ finally did pass, you can imagine that moment for all of the Sahaba. You can imagine how everyone was completely losing their senses at this time. And the very next prayer that came, Sayyidina Bilal was asked to go and make the adhan. And he goes and he says, Allahu Akbar, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And when he gets to ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, he stopped at ashhadu anna. He could not get it out. And he started to choke and started to cry. And all of the companions at this time started to cry. And he tried this for 3 days. And Sayyidina Bilal could not get himself to do the adhan. And at this point, when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq anhu was made the commander of the leader of the believers, he says to him, "Oh, Abu Bakr, please let me go." And Sayyidina Abu Bakr tries to get him to stay, and he responds to him and he says that if you freed me for yourself, then fine, I will stay. But if you freed me for the sake of Allah, then please let me go. And then Sayyidina Bilal would go and settle in Syria. And it's narrated that at one time he saw a dream of the Prophet ﷺ after his death when he was in Syria. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Oh Bilal, you have not come to visit us." And Sayyidina Bilal he came back at a hurried pace, and he came back to Medina after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, after leaving to Syria. He came back and he goes to the grave site of the Prophet ﷺ, the room of Aisha radiallahu anha, and his the two grandsons, Hussein and Hassan, they come out and they ask Bilal, "Oh Bilal, please make the adhan one more time. We would love to hear the adhan so we could remember you from that time, and we can remember the Prophet ﷺ and his companionship at that time." Because when you have memories, you have sights and you have sounds and you have smells that are associated with the memories. One of the memories that the Sahaba held dear to their hearts were the sounds of the adhan, particularly from the mouth and the lips of Hazrat Bilal radiallahu anhu during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And after he passed, as we know from what we just spoke about, he would not make adhan again. And so Hazrat Bilal goes and he says, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And immediately, it's as if it was like before, people start to drop everything that they're doing, right? The business people, everybody that's on the street, because they hear the sound and they started to think, is the Prophet ﷺ back? Is the Nabi Rasulullah, is he back? And they hear Hazrat Bilal. And again, when he gets to Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, he starts to choke up and he cries and he's not able to finish because of his deep, deep love of his beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's one other episode I wanted to talk about Hazrat Bilal, where the companions, they were gathered and there was a debate that was happening, and Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, who was from the tribe of Ghifar, he was a man that was a very somewhat rough around the edges. He was a very in terms of his belief and his ibadah and his rituals. If you looked at Abu Dharr, he was the man, right? He would fast. He would everything in his ibadah. It was down pat. And there was a moment where he had a gaffe, and he gets into somewhat of a debate dialogue with Hazrat Bilal, and he calls him, "O son of a black woman, Ya ibn Sauda." And Hazrat Bilal, he hears this, and this is a man, Hazrat Bilal, somebody that has no ego. If he had any ego, it was already shattered during the time of his capture and slavery when he was under Umayyah. He has no ego. It's been totally taken out of him. And so he goes to the Prophet ﷺ out of care for Abu Dhar, out of care, not to complain, but to inform the Prophet ﷺ that such and such happened, and Abu Dhar said this to me. And the Prophet ﷺ, he summons Abu Dhar, and he says that, "Oh Abu Dhar, have you said such a thing?" And he responds in the affirmative, and he says that, "Ya Abu Dhar, you have the traces of Jahiliyyah in you. You have the traces of Jahiliyyah in you," right? The old days when they used to be racist, and Islam did away with the divisions of color and the divisions of socioeconomics and all of that. Islam did away, and it blurred those lines, that the only way that you would be judged would be in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is by your taqwa. That is by your God consciousness. And so Abu Dhar goes and finds Bilal radiallahu anhu, not to go to him and to start a fight and to say, "Did you go and tell on me? Did you go and tattletale to the Prophet ﷺ?" No, he understands that only a friend will go out of their way to do this, to rectify his behavior. And so he goes and he puts his face on the dirt and he says, "Ya Bilal, step on my face until this jahiliyyah comes out of me. Step on my face until this jahiliyyah comes out of me." And Bilal, he picks him up by both shoulders and he says, "Ya Abu Dhar, you are my friend, you are my companion. How can I do that to you?" And then they hug and they make peace. So this is the story of Bilal ibn Rabah towards the end of his life. When the conquest of Jerusalem happened, and the patriarch of Jerusalem, he wanted to give the key only to Umar, only to Umar. So at that time, Umar goes radiallahu anhu to accept the opening of Jerusalem, and he summons Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anhu to come as well. And you have some of the the younger Sahabi are there, the older Sahabi Mu'adh ibn Jabal is there, Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah is there, and a lot of these men, when they used to hear the adhan of the Prophet ﷺ, they used to have black beards. And today, at the conquest of Jerusalem, they now have gray beards. And Umar, he requests Hazrat Bilal to make the adhan at Quds. And in Jerusalem, Hazrat Bilal makes the adhan, and he is a figure who made the adhan in Medina, he made the adhan in Mecca, and he made the adhan in Al-Quds, in Jerusalem. And when they heard the adhan from the beautiful voice of Hazrat Bilal, those beards that used to be black back then, and now they were gray, they started to get drenched with tears as they're listening to the adhan, and how Islam is now spreading after the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so when Hazrat Bilal passed away in the 20th of Hijrah, his wife was with him, and she said, what a day of grief, what a day of grief. The same way that Bilal was saying when the Prophet ﷺ was passing away. And Bilal said, "No, this is a day of joy. This is truly a day of joy, because I am about to be reunited with my beloved and his companions, with the Prophet ﷺ and his best friend Abu Bakr, and the Prophet ﷺ. He's going to be reunited with them." And so he was extremely happy, and he left as a man in relative poverty. He had no belongings to him. He had no children at the time of passing away. But what we learned from his life was that this man went through the worst of tortures, and he hung on tight. He hung on tight, that as the hadith says, that towards the end of time, this deen will become very difficult to hold on to, like a piece of burning coal. And that's exactly what Hazrat Bilal did. His perseverance, his dedication to Islam is uncanny. He is the poster child, the poster person of the commitment to Islam, irrespective of the type of torture that he went through, and others went through as well, but specifically Bilal, radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Bilal. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, unite us with him and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you read about the virtues of the muezzin, the caller to Islam, the caller to the prayer, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he advised us that on the day of judgment they will have long necks. That's how you can recognize them, that those that used to make the adhan will have long necks. And may we get to hear the adhan directly from the beautiful voice of Hazrat Bilal on the day of judgment. And may we have the company of the Prophet ﷺ and his beautiful companions in the afterlife. Barakallahu li wa lakum wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.